Hi and welcome to another episode of the Glam Reaper Podcast. I'm your host, Jennifer Muldowney, aka the Glam Reaper herself. And on today's episode, we are talking two of my favourite things, funerals and food. Let's get into it. Hi everyone and welcome to another episode of the Glam Reaper Podcast. I'm your host, Jennifer Muldowney, aka the Glam Reaper herself. On today's episode, I'm very excited because we are talking my two favourite loves, food and funerals. Yay! Although today is probably a tough day, which we'll get into because I'm actually detoxing. But anyway, so please, Rosie, welcome and introduce yourself to the audience.
Hi, thanks so much for having me. Yes, I'm Rosie Grant, and food and funerals. I'm going to use that. I love that phrasing. But yeah, food and death talk are like my two combined loves.
That's amazing. Now, you have done so well. So it's funny that during COVID, when we all had sort of all this time to ourselves, it's so funny because I'm big into sort of I don't want to say life coaching, but I'm big into sort of improving myself. I love manifesting. I love vision boards. I'm looking at it right behind the camera here. Like I'm big into anything feng shui, although I'm always getting that wrong. I think it's feng shui. I'm terrible. And my friend who I interviewed on the podcast at the very beginning, she'll probably shoot me. But anyway, I'm into all of these things. Like it's all about bettering ourselves, just really positive and just putting that positive energy out into the world. And one of the things that it was like, you know, to get your purpose in life or to be fulfilling your life's whatever purpose, that you really should focus on things you love. And so I sat down and I was like, okay, but I'm in the funeral business. Do I love this? Like, do I really love this? And so I really started trying to hone down in everything I do. And I realized like I love food. And, you know, COVID we were all kind of stuck indoors and stuff like that. So, you know, I would like find myself cooking and baking, and those are my two things that I choose to relax. And working in the space I work in, I'm not a funeral director, and so I don't know, you know, they have an even tougher job. I could never embalm or anything like that, but that's how I decompress and how I de-stress is cooking and baking and food. And so I thought to myself, I was like, I wonder, like, should I start like doing some cooking and doing some of my things and bring it into what I do? And I guess I do it in a certain way because most of the memorials that I organize do have catered reception and stuff. So I guess I have my two loves in that sense. Um,
Mm.
but I did actually film myself cooking. And I think one of the funniest videos, even when I look back, I'm like, oh my God, what am I like? Was when I was when I was doing Thanksgiving dinner. And it was my first time stuffing a turkey. Well, it's actually a hysterical video because like I never knew giblets existed before I found them in the
No.
turkey's ass. Anyway, I'm digressing. Oh, I'm talking about me. Um
Oh,
but
I'm obsessed with this though.
it's very, even I look back in the video and I'm crying with laughter. It's like my facial expressions. Oh my God, what is this? Anyway, Rosie, how did you get into this? So to give everyone context, and forgive me if I forget something or mislead anybody. So Rosie effectively has an incredible social media following because you create or recreate the recipes from gravestones.
hmm
I
Yeah.
never even knew recipes were on gravestones. This is genius. And I think it started just out of curiosity for you, right? So
It
tell us, talk us through the journey. How did you get
Well,
here?
weirdly, it started out of a homework assignment, even
Best
stranger.
homework assignment ever.
Um, I mean, similar to kind of to what you were talking about of the pandemic hit, and I just had started a library science master's degree at the University of Maryland. And so my vision board, right, the year beforehand had been like, I've always wanted to become a librarian. And so I was in library school. It was completely virtual just because of the pandemic. The program would have been flexible anyways. And I was at the same time interning at a cemetery, congressional in DC. And I was taking this library class that was all about networks and algorithms, basically how to like go viral on like TikTok and Instagram. And so I didn't know what to make my account about. And my professor was like, well, you're interning at a cemetery. Make your just go into like cemetery TikTok or grave talk. And so I was like, I don't think there's an audience for that. And so that's why I was even posting about cemeteries to begin with. And then, of course, flash
Oh,
forward to this first gravestone. And so after a while, I was first posting just about our own cemetery and like people who had died and were buried and unusual stories that we heard about them. And then that opened the world to just learning about different gravestones in general and memorials. And I heard about this grave in Brooklyn, New York. That's the grave of Naomi Odessa Miller Dawson. And she has a spritz cookie. It's like an open cookbook. It's the most beautiful gravestone. Like it looks like you just like go on this like beautiful grassy field and her like book gravestone is open and it has her spritz cookie recipe. And just like you were saying, of all the people learning how to cook during the pandemic, this was me too. I cooked it extremely inaccurately, but I posted it, and then the rest is kind of history.
wow. And where is it in Brooklyn? Is it in Greenwood?
It's in Greenwood, yes. It's like
Oh
right in the
my God.
middle. Yeah.
I'll have to go and investigate. I've been to Greenwood so many times, but now I'm going to have to investigate this.
Oh
And
my,
you had heard about this recipe
yes.
yourself, went came up here from DC.
Exactly that. Yeah, like Atlas Obscura, which is like the best website for like learn. If whenever I'm bored, I'm like, I'll go into Atlas. And I think a lot of cemetery TikTokers and like cemetery content creators, we very heavily rely on Atlas Obscura just because like it has everything. It's like unusual stories, it's all mapped out. And so I had heard about this gravestone from Atlas. And there's actually several other gravestones as well, also featured on Atlas Obscura. That's great for cemetery content. And then when I was Googling Naomi just to learn more who she was, there's just Google searches. Other ones popped up. Some had made local news, some were in different blog posts, some were on Twitter. And I just started collecting them. And I did like data mapping in classes. So I just made a big map where all of them were and started cooking through all of them.
Oh my God, that's amazing. Because I mean, that was going to be one of my questions was where do you get your content? Like how, I mean, how do you find these recipes? So clearly you just troll the internet and figure it out
Literally.
that way. Now, can I ask though, I guess there could be recipes out there on gravestones, but it has to be documented by somebody so and isn't online, so therefore you don't know about it, I guess.
Yes. Oh, there's plenty. I mean, the first, I would say in the beginning, I found about nine just through Google searches and social media. And like, there's one in California that I found it because someone misspelled recipe. And I was looking through all these different hashtags and I accidentally misspelled recipe myself. So I was like, oh, there's already someone who posted to this. And it was a gravestone recipe in California. So I was like, oh my gosh, like the chances of that are
That
crazy. And
that's so funny though, because I often think that sometimes I'll misspell something when I'm doing a hashtag on something, and I'm like,
yep,
you know what? I bet you I'm not the only person who's done that.
no.
So there you
It
go.
actually has a weird, it comes into favorite
Yeah.
sometimes.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah,
That's
I mean, so that was the first 9 of them. I'm now up to almost 20, and the rest have come. I mean, I'm very lucky that it's gotten some traction and some press and media, which I'm very grateful for. Partially because now families have started reaching out, being like, "My mom's buried here. Here's a photo of her recipe. We would love for you to cook it." Or
oh
here's my
no.
aunt's grave. Or even there's a woman who's still alive in Arkansas. And I talked to her the other day, and she has a cookie recipe. And so we got to actually chit chat about how she put together her gravestone for whenever she passes.
Wow. So I mean it's kind of become this little thing. Now is it a case of, you're just riding the wave and you're enjoying sort of, I don't want to say the attention, but you're enjoying, all that it's bringing? Do you want to stick with librarianism or working in a cemetery, or has this now brought sort of where you're like, maybe this is a thing?
Yeah, it's a great question. Partially just, I think the last year, I mean, this account got started again out of homework, and the community that's come out of it has been amazing. I can't say it's been the most unusual of topics. My parents are both ghost tour guides in Virginia,
Oh
and
wow.
like my dad loves history. I had interned at a cemetery just because I was really interested in cemeteries in general. Like, so my program was library science, but it's library science and archives. I think cemeteries have the coolest archives, whether for genealogy or just local history. And so, and food as well. Like I was a creative writing minor in college and I studied food writing. And I just feel like kind of what you were saying beforehand, food connects to so many different things. I've met a lot of really interesting people from this. So I would definitely say last year was just trying to keep my head above water of just the explosion that happened that was
Yeah.
very unexpected. And I think this coming year, my focus is more of like getting to know who these people were. I'd like to visit all of the graves. Ideally, if I could visit all of them next year, it'd be great. And then maybe even meet the families and, see who are these people? How do I actually cook them? Things like that.
Yeah. That's really beautiful actually. That's somebody should do that with you. Like that's really beautiful because no, that's something, it's like what I do with the memorials and stuff. That's just so wholesome. It's like that's what it's about. It's about, okay, it's gone viral and it's amazing and stuff, but at the end of the day, there's a person behind that, tombstone. There's a family that are missing that person,
Mhm.
or maybe centuries ago. I don't know how old some of these tombstones are, but like there is a family behind that. And so I mean, yeah, visiting the gravestones will be amazing, but exactly that, like meeting the family, and maybe has the cookie recipe gotten lost,
Yeah.
maybe they're not using it anymore. I mean, I definitely have, my mom is still alive, even though I joke because of what I do. Whenever I'm talking on media, I feel like I kill my parents off all the time, but my mom is still alive. I was just texting her just there a few minutes ago. But she has recipes that I think are kind of iconic and stuff like that, and
Oh,
whether
that's
they go on
cool.
a tombstone, I mean, I doubt it, because I don't think burial is kind of for us as
Mhm.
such anymore. It's, and that's the thing as well, which is beautiful about your project and what you're doing, is burial is almost becoming something in the past. It's
Yeah.
kind of history in and of itself, like between, and again, this is funeral stuff that I don't know if I'm sure you probably are aware of, but between, alkaline hydrolysis and the human composting and all these new things, and obviously cremation is just growing and growing, and we're running out of
Yeah.
space. Like burial in and of itself is becoming, and a tombstone, like a gravestone, is almost artifacts at this stage.
Yeah, completely. So, and it's expensive to die too. It's very expensive. Both of my grandmothers passed away during the pandemic.
Oh,
And at first we were like, I mean, neither of them had particular recipes that we might have considered, but just the stone, the plot, and everything. Like, this isn't all of these, mostly urban women, all of these women have, they very much committed to a thing that not
yeah,
everyone's just going to casually do.
yeah. Well, that's yeah, and exactly, you're right. Like, even I didn't even think of that actually. Even if mom, again, here I am killing her off again.
I do this all the
Sorry,
time.
Mum, yeah, sorry. Even if we did bury her back in Ireland, which would be expensive, and then got a gravestone, like I'm not sure actually about it here, and I should actually know that, but I'm not sure about it here. At home, as far as I can remember, from when I wrote a book about it, it was each letter, like or word, is a price. There's a price to putting, because somebody has to obviously engrave it
Yeah.
on the stone. I don't think it's kind of a whatever you want. I can't imagine it's like that over here. I think it's pretty much like the New York Times. It's per letter or word. So yeah, if it's a lengthy recipe, it starts to get a bit
They're
ridiculous.
definitely committing to, I mean, some of these, there's this one grave in Israel, and it's like all of the and it's in Hebrew too, so it's very like detailed, carved out. It takes up, it's like this gigantic rectangular like pillar almost. And I'm like, that must have been very expensive to do. But
Yeah.
it's beautiful. It's like, it's such a, they definitely, there was a sacrifice to it. But now they have this gorgeously designed gravestone for the family to remember the person.
Yeah. Oh, it is definitely a beautiful thing. It's as I said, it's just kind of, it's become almost artifact in
Yeah.
a sense. I mean, I did visit my grandparents, my grandparents on my dad's side grave when I was at home, just because I hadn't actually seen the grave in a couple of years. But my grandparents on my mother's side, they died so long ago that we never go to that grave. And so it's always fascinated me, cemeteries like that. As I said, I'm not a funeral director, and so I very much am on somewhat on the outside, but I've always been fascinated with sort of cemeteries and epitaphs. And I remember having this concept for a film, not a film, a series, where you went, this person was magic or whatever, was one of these, where they would go into a gravestone. So they would jump into a gravestone and become that person. They would live in that person's
Oh
life,
my
and that was
god.
their not superpower. It was just sort of a, I mean, still potentially could be something.
So cool. That
Yeah,
I You should pitch that to someone because that sounds like an amazing show.
really, because every episode is a different episode, effectively,
Yeah,
because they've gone into a different life. I mean, it's kind of along the lines of the time traveler's wife, I guess.
honestly, yeah.
So you
That's so
know,
cool. It is fun to like someone at congressional, and they may be recording someone else even college cemeteries, like open air museums. And it's very fun to like walk down and like see two different graves, particularly if they're like well known graves. And you're like, they didn't know each other in life. And the fact that they're now neighbors basically in death, like in
totally.
congressional, like we have a former Edgar Hoover, J. Edgar Hoover, is buried there with all of these people who hated his guts, and they're all neighbors together. And I'm like, this is so spicy that they're right next to each other.
Totally. I'm actually envisioning because I know they did it a couple of times. I think it was around Halloween, the episodes of The Simpsons where their ghosts kind of come up and they're
Oh my
you
god,
know the way they do it. I think they did it in some other did they do it as part of Soul, the movie, the Pixar movie Soul as well? They kind of did similar, but I'm envisioning Simpsons for some reason. The Simpsons is where they all come out of their graves and
that's
yeah,
so funny. I can picture that. And honestly, even like what you were talking about of like a story of going into it kind of feels like Soul, of like people going into each other's bodies, and like I don't know. That's very cool. I love
yeah.
that.
Well, and again, it kind of comes down to, and I'm sure you're similar, walking through cemeteries and like I'm sure you've had the same experience where you've looked at it out a grave and you're like, oh my God, 5 years. They only had five, like they only survived 5 years. What was their life like? What was, who were their parents? Like, what did they die of? And
Yeah.
there is a bit of a morbid curiosity. And I know like nowadays when somebody dies, and I know there's a couple of schools of thought on this and that it is not anybody's business what somebody dies of. And I know in funerals, there's always, especially it's a very Irish thing, you're like, oh gosh, and what happened? And we're
Yeah,
very
you always wanna know for sure.
yeah, yeah, but it's almost a human compulsion, like a morbid curiosity. I feel like there's no ill will behind it.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
just you want to know. And I don't even know why you want to know, but you're just like, was it tragic? Not was it tragic? It's always tragic, especially
Yeah.
when it's a young person, but like, was it an accident? And honestly, I don't know why that flavors, what's going. I
Yes.
guess it's just curiosity, imagination and stuff, but
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it is interesting I mean, most of these people all pull information from their obituaries. Very few of them, maybe two of them of like 20 say how they died. And yeah,
yeah,
the back of your mind, you're always curious. And that's a question that I'll often get like when people are asking about the gravestones is like, how did they die? And 9 times out of 10, I don't know. Like most
yeah,
of these graves are a little bit older. I mean, not like the actual age of them is not very old. The oldest one's from 1994. But the people were in their 60s and 70s and 80s. There were no like children, if that
yeah,
makes sense. But
yeah. Well, I
you
can't
know,
imagine too many children would have too many recipes.
it's just like really good mac and cheese recipe,
Yeah, 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 yeah.
blue box.
Mom's cookie dough, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, hey,
Yeah, well, and that's honestly, in some ways, that's probably what makes what you do sort of heartwarming as well, because I guess you're not dealing with infants or children or teenagers or people who didn't get to live their life. And I'm not saying
yeah,
at 60 you've lived your life, but you've
totally.
somebody who's at least had good innings,
Yeah.
who's lived somewhat to create a recipe. So,
Mhm.
because I think if you were kind of trying to, if whatever you were doing, I mean, I know we had a lady on the show here who's also TikTok famous for her grave cleaning, and she's amazing. She's so lovely.
Either Manic Pixie Dream Mom, Lady Taffos. There's a
Lady
handful.
Tapas.
Oh my gosh, I'm obsessed with her stuff.
Yeah.
She's so cool.
She's so, and you know what? She's so lovely, and she's gone through a lot herself personally, and it just makes what she does so much more amazing, I guess. But like that, she's cleaning graves, so I guess hers can be of any age, and it's yeah, it's definitely harder. But so what's the plans? What's the future? What are we thinking? What's next?
What's next? Well, so I'm hoping to fly to San Francisco either this or next month and go to this snickerdoodle cookie. So this was the one that I first heard about because of the hashtag that both of
Right.
them spelled. The granddaughter of this woman reached out on TikTok. And so I'm hoping to actually cook the recipe with her family. And then for the rest of this year, too, I think I'm trying to plan like different mini trips that I can to just experience this. Back in the fall, I met Naomi, so the Spritz cookie in Brooklyn. I met the family of that woman, and we cooked her Spritz cookie together, and it was so cool. They were lovely. They still have her cookie press that like she used to make these famous cookies, and it was incredible just hearing them tell stories about her. And so I personally would love as many of these people as possible. And a lot of these people, again, they're not very old graves. So it's like their grandkids are on TikTok or their kids are on TikTok and have reached out, or they're on Instagram. So this whole little like food community has started forming. So I'd like love to like almost take that offline on some sense. I'd like to meet some of these people in person.
Absolutely. Well, it's definitely, I feel like social media and all that, it's a great starting point, but like that meeting people offline is definitely, it's so much more rewarding as well, because you can actually form, I feel like you form a real bond then or something, whereas online it's like,
Yeah, exactly. You can only say so much. And especially kind of like what you were even talking about of like, no, at the end of the day, like we're talking because someone has passed away, and there's memories and there's weird feelings, and it's I think for my own understanding of this whole industry, and like I was not familiar with the death positive movement. I wasn't familiar with the idea of like memorializing people and like thinking about celebration of life and of course leading to death. And so I don't know, I'm trying to keep that at the back of my mind while having these like conversations, because it's a little scary. Like we're
yeah.
talking about something that to me is very terrifying, and I'm trying to grapple with that. Yeah, I don't know. So that's hopefully going to be this next coming year, if not
Well,
for a while.
amazing, and we support you and can't wait to see the next recipes. And maybe I'm going to try some when I'm not on this stupid detox. Maybe I'll try and copy some of your recipes and see how I get on. I must actually keep an eye out. I'm sure there's some recipes on some Irish gravestones.
Oh, I would imagine so. There's so much like,
I
and
can
even
imagine.
like the fact that there's two in Israel, because at first I was like, oh, it's just maybe a US thing, but I could definitely see there being different places around. And everyone
Definitely.
has many pretty cemeteries.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I will keep my eyeballs out when I'm in Ireland.
Yes.
I'm in New York right now, but when I'm in Ireland, I'll definitely keep my eyes out and I'll let you know if there's any
Oh, thank you
recipes.
so much. Appreciate it.
No worries. Thank you so much for coming on the Glam Reaper podcast, Rosie. So that was another episode from the Glam Reaper podcast. Let us know what you think. Would you like Rosie to come and maybe visit? Is there a gravestone near you that has an interesting recipe on it? We'd love to hear from you. Glam Reaper Podcast at gmail.com. We'll talk to you soon.